Welcome to episode 2 of the One Life podcast. We had our first episode last week. We've had actually a few people watch and listen, which is pretty awesome. If you are listening to us right now, you can also watch us on our YouTube channel. Just search for One Life podcast on YouTube or click the link in the description wherever you're watching right now. So thank you guys for joining us. One Life Church, just wanted to let you know that we are one church in multiple locations. So we have 2 locations in Evansville, one on the east side of Evansville, Indiana, one on the west side of Evansville, Indiana, and then one in Henderson, Kentucky. And speaking of Henderson, we have 2 of our staff from Henderson, One Life Henderson, here with us this morning. It's not even this morning. I don't know why I said morning. It's just like habit in church world to say morning, I think. But to my left, I have Ryan Nunn, campus pastor from One Life Henderson, and Ryan was on last week.
Great to be back.
Thanks, Ryan. It's this nice radio intro that's in there. And then on the right end over here, we have Josh Stanley, and Josh is the connections director at One Life Henderson.
Happy to be here.
Yes. And then we have our lead pastor, Bret Nicholson, who will be leading a lot of the conversation, and we get to hear from him about some of the things that maybe he wanted to say or get to on Sunday that sometimes you just don't have all the time for.
That's right. So I'll kind of wear out my welcome and just kind of keep talking beyond didn't get my 35 minutes of message. So you mean you had more to say? We figured there was plenty, so okay, I'll do that.
Yeah. So kind of wanted to start with something we talked about last week is an idea as our staff is giving everyone kind of a little bit of an insight of what the behind the scenes looks like for us when we're preparing for a Sunday weekend experience, but also kind of that message. So one of our values is we evaluate everything for continual improvement. And one of those things that we evaluate is the Sunday message. And so whoever's teaching that week, we usually record a backup version just in case internet would happen to go down, which sometimes it does.
What are the odds?
It happened last Sunday. And so this past week was Bret, and we record on Thursdays, and we run it just like it's a normal broadcast. And then we evaluate it as a team afterwards and give whoever's teaching feedback of what they should keep, add, tweak, or what was the last one? There's like 4 things. Lose, yeah. And so kind of want to give you guys just an overview of what that day looks like. I don't know if everybody wants to start. Ryan, you want to start? Anything you want to?
Sure. I've preached several times, and I think when it comes to the evaluation thing, because most people don't do that. So any other setting that I'd been in prior to One Life, there wasn't a lot of evaluation there. So whenever you kind of pour your heart out in a message and you do all this stuff, then you're trying to kind of teach truth from the Bible and all. It's just a big deal. And then you quickly realize that everything that you thought was so amazing wasn't bad, just needs to be tweaked a little bit, or maybe not there anymore. So
share your heart differently next time. Yeah. You can pour out your heart, but pour out your heart just in a different fashion.
Well, the things that are the most helpful, tend to hurt the most, so it's hard to hear at first, but it really does help. I don't know. I think it's very, very helpful.
Yeah, it's funny. This past weekend, we did the Thursday thing, and I did not like it the first run through, and then we evaluated it, and I thought, okay, but we didn't go redo it. They thought it was good enough or whatever, but I still didn't like it, and so I changed it over the weekend. Usually I don't change them a lot, but I changed them some, and this one I changed, in my mind, pretty significantly from Thursday to Sunday. Well, then in Henderson, ironically enough, we make these because just in case something fails and the internet fails, and they saw the Thursday version that I did not like. And then I changed, and I like the 9 a.m. at our East campus. I like that one pretty good, but they didn't see it. And then I went over to Henderson 11 and did something completely different, even from that, not completely different, but different from 9 at East. So we're talking about the message today a little bit, but none of them were the same. So I'm sorry about that. But
it's amazing how much life shuts down with no internet. Like where we are in history, when internet goes away, it's like everything's crazy. So it was a little interesting.
Yeah. So Josh heard like the 9 o'clock broadcast one, right, and then he also heard the 11 o'clock in Henderson. Or did you?
Yeah. I sat in the 11 live, so I saw that yesterday morning, and then on my way here, I was just trying to be adequately prepared for this discussion. I listened to the broadcast from East at 9 a.m.
You're a responsible guy. That's really, really neat. Who else does that out there? It's good.
I don't know. I tried. I do my best.
So the 11 o'clock at Henderson to me felt kind of kooky. If I'm being honest, if I'm comparing the two, you can say it. It's fine. Did you think it was?
No. I thought it was fine.
Okay,
I got good notes, and I didn't see the 9 a.m. broadcast until. So my wife and I lead a growth group. We meet on Sunday evenings. And we had our discussion and everything last night based on, the 11 a.m. Like live message.
You based the discussion on the 11 a.m.
Right.
Because the 9 a.m. was worthless that no one discussed about at all. Okay, good.
No, I didn't see it until today.
Okay. So I apologize all of you in Henderson who heard the 9 o'clock. It was a tape of something I didn't even like.
You may or may not know this, Brett, but Josh is a pretty avid note taker. So he's usually the guy on first or second row that's up there jotting down all these notes while you're up there talking.
Okay, and here's a trade secret of all preachers. We love those people. There's always like one or two at the most. But if you do notice someone out there doing that, you're like, all right, check me out. I don't know if I deserve this or not. But if you ever wanted, I don't know, somehow to get extra favor with the pastor or preacher, just even if you're faking it, just out there just taking notes.
We did turn those in at the end of the week and then get a gold star.
Josh, have you ever received a gold star?
I have. I just got my first gold star last week.
Congratulations.
So I was kind of excited about it.
What'd you do with it? Where's it at?
It's in my binder. I carry around a little binder where I keep all my pertinent notes.
Notes and stuff?
And it's in my binder.
Look who's the overachiever. You know who's never got a gold star? Me. Never.
That's not true. You got one last year.
I did not.
You
Not
sure?
a formal one. I've never had it. We have a
really?
gold star
Just a
system in
verbal?
here. That's our executive director is actually literally gives gold stars. She's texted me one. No, that doesn't matter. She's actually had staff meetings where she gives a gold star and everybody goes, wow, aren't you awesome? Never had one in 7-8 years. Yeah, ever. So
I don't know. That means something. I don't know what, but I mean, gosh.
it means I have a lot of
sad.
angst about it. Is what it means. That's ward's going on there right now. So it's probably because she listened to the Thursday version of the message.
So what is one of the hardest, just from your seat, you preach a whole lot more than I do per se, but what is, when you're having to preach a message kind of 2 or 3 times in a row on a Sunday, you said that the 11 o'clock felt kooky. What do you mean? Like, what's the hard part?
I was
about
being
that?
kooky. I think, okay, here's another little inside track. The night before, it was a Saturday night, I actually went to a Taylor Swift concert. That's right. We can talk about that. Saw her up in Indy. Long story. A friend of mine sent my whole family, paid for it. We were sitting in, we had great seats, but 2 of us decided to drive home to be in time for church, and I was functioning on 3 hours sleep. So by the time I got to the 11 o'clock, I could feel myself just kind of coming off the rails mentally and everything, and I just started heaving. Like I said something I didn't see in any of the other versions in that, and I could tell when I got into it, like, why are you saying this? Just stop. But try to finish my thought.
Hard to stop yourself.
That's what I meant by kooky, and I said a few side comments that, and I think I'm more that way in Henderson at 11 because I'm not talking to cameras. I'm a little less self-conscious, a little more free because I know it's not being taped.
Nobody else
I'll
is
make
gonna see it
editorial
again.
comments that I won't normally say. I'll let you know on that too.
We love that,
Okay,
though.
good.
Henderson, we
Yeah,
love
it's
that.
like, because I know it's not being taped or watched. I'm like, okay, that's
So
fine.
that Henderson 11 crowd gets like the
They get the raw, stupid version of it, probably, but or at least
The
the one
unhinged Brett.
the unhinged and less. So
So if you're attend One Life Henderson, you've been trying to figure out which service you should go to. Definitely 11, because you never know what you're going to get.
the 11, you might get loads of heresy, but
Yeah.
you might get a few laughs out of it. Yeah.
We can edit that part.
Yeah, okay. Right.
No, that's good. So for you, like, as you're, like, I guess Ryan too, as you guys have been in that evaluation portion, honestly, what's that like when you're hearing other people talk about what you just, like, what you just communicated out?
What's it like?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like, it can't be fun per se.
No, it's never fun. I don't like Thursdays. I don't. I kind of dread it. It sounds bad to say that, but I do. But it was my idea to set them up that way. So because it's kind of like exercise for me personally. Now, Josh lives to exercise and is really into it in a way, so he can go beat people up or whatever it is he does. And then more on that later. But it's kind of, it's one of those necessary painful things. You do it, and it's a good thing. But you don't necessarily like the process itself of hurting your muscles or whatever. It's the same thing with that.
I'll never forget the first time I preached. You pulled me aside right before we evaluated. Everybody else was in the room in Henderson in the conference room waiting, and you pulled me aside and you said, hey, just want to give you a heads up. It's easier to remember that everybody in here wants you to succeed. And
Did I say that?
You did. You told me that, and you said we're all on the same team. We're in
Gold
this
star.
together. And you affirmed me that I wouldn't be on stage if it wasn't something that people had seen. And so one of the principles that I always stick to, because it really is a little bit personal when I remember, especially the first time, I've had one message that I felt like it was pretty raked over the coals in a sense, not disrespectfully, but it was just, I had to rebuild it, And even as tough as it was, by the time we got to Sunday, and even now looking back, it's super helpful, right? Because we know what we want to get out, and anybody who's done any public speaking, you know what you want to say, but the hard part is actually getting it out in a way to where everybody's not looking at you, rolling their eyes, saying, "Please hurry up."
Yeah, and to be fair, when I say I don't like it, I don't like the process because it does make me nervous and all that. But I enjoy the process with everybody because speaking of the table kind of thing, we do sit down, we have a meal together. It is all friends together again, working for that common good. And I know everybody's working for, and we have a lot of fun with it, and it's pretty funny and all that. And so everybody tries to make it as relaxed as we possibly can. But
the thing I appreciate the most about it, though, really is that we say we evaluate everything for continual improvement, but you lead out in that in a sense. I guess we all do from the stage, but it's just that's a value that we hold in pretty high esteem, and so it's not something that we don't experience together. So that's a cool thing about it too, I think.
Yeah, it's helped me enormously. I mean, it really has. It's made me, and Sarah's very good about reminding me that, that students matter, speak to them, or she'll have an angle because, I don't know, she's about 50 years younger than me, and something like that. So, but just kind of bringing up issues that I would, or hears things just with different ears than I normally would. And she's probably saved me a lot of grief before, but hey, you might want to just not do that, not say that. That's not a good thing.
My role for a while, because we assigned everyone kind of roles to make sure everyone was focused on something while whoever was teaching, and we were all kind of listening for things. And that was mine for a while, that Natalie, our executive director, had given me, was to think about that, because a lot of times when we're talking, I think we all do this. I mean, even if I'm a service leader, sometimes I'm not even thinking about it. When you're talking to people in the room, you're talking to adults, but there's also middle school and high school students in a lot of our rooms, and being able to communicate with them is, I try to think of that, because sometimes we don't all do that. So if one person thinks about it, it's better.
That's right. Because I don't think of it like I should.
Well, you do a pretty good job.
You probably got a gold star for that effort.
Nah.
I think. Okay, good.
No. I'm telling you what, though, I'm having fun mixing this right now. This is fun. Just turning dials every once in a while when you guys start talking. This is cool.
Are you actually doing anything, or are you just kind of...
I think so. We'll see how it sounds later.
All right, good.
Either way.
I want to touch on what Ryan said a little bit about the just that eval piece. I don't get to be a part of the Thursday evals just because I have a day job that kind of prohibits me from being there. But that eval piece is still a huge part of what I do in the connections world. And Ryan said that anytime we're public speaking, we know what we're trying to get across, and it doesn't always translate the way that it sounded up here in my head. So anyone who's been attending Henderson for a while has heard me really botch some of those service leader spots, just because I get up there and I say and I trip over my words the whole time. But and I'm not saying I'm there yet, but as we do that eval process, I feel like I'm getting a little more comfortable up there. I always show up prepared, and one of the guys in my growth group counts how many times I say and lets me know after service. So I feel like that's an evaluation.
You better believe it. That's right. The only difference at a formal one is to be written on the board. We counted 27 ums. We would say
which we used to do that for somebody. That was a job. Someone was counting ums or something.
Oh yeah, and I've been tagged off base for repeated words and everything. It's good, but let's just all be honest. We just have formalized what everybody does informally when they're sitting out there listening.
Absolutely,
everybody's thinking the same thing. We've just created the opportunity to say it, which that is a good thing. It's uncomfortable, but I like to think it does everybody in the audience a favor in the end.
Yeah, it's one of our staff principles. We talk to each other, not about each other. And so it's really making that a thing instead of talking about, oh man, Bret, that wasn't very good, but I'm not going to tell him. Like instead, we'll just say, Bret, that wasn't very good. And you kind of make it better.
That's right. And then I shuffle off embarrassed, and then I come back, and you're still my buddies.
We've never said that. It wasn't good.
Right.
It's never not been good.
Really?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think it's always good. There's always just things, oh, yeah, that was great.
But I got to say, one time I was talking about her not giving me a gold star executive director we have here. One time I drove away from the campus, and she called me and said, hey, I've been thinking about this message, and I really think it is missing something. It didn't come up. For some reason, we didn't do that. You call back, and we retaped it. because it was coming into Christmas. It was kind of a big thing. She was like, yeah, I don't know what it is, but I got that call on the highway and but that was a good thing. But usually we say it face to face, but she eventually just said, maybe everybody was anxious to get to Christmas or something. I don't know what it was,
but it is a pretty full day. I mean, we start out like from the CG side, our creative team will make the slides and make sure everything's ready to go. We get your notes Wednesday usually and make those and get everything in order. So then when people do come in on Sunday, our teams come in, it's ready to go. I mean, for the most part, unless, there's a few tweaks maybe sometimes that whoever is teaching might make. But I mean, it's a pretty full day of the setup. We pray together. We hear the message, we eat lunch together and talk about it, and then we evaluate, and then usually from there it's getting everything else kind of finished up from the, I don't know what that was, sorry.
Yeah, we have our service leaders do their spots. Now, we haven't done this very long, just for the last several weeks. We've actually, you have to stand on the stage and say, well, Josh didn't have to do that. Well, no, wait a minute, we send in recordings, don't we?
Yeah, well, I haven't done it since we started doing that.
We don't count the ums yet.
That might be why I haven't done it since we started recording it.
Okay, yeah. And so even if you can't be at our meeting, you have to send a recording in and says, and you can't say, this is what I'm going to say. You have to say it how you're going to say it. And then we send you notes and say, please don't say it that way.
Stop saying
yeah, that's right. So
and I'll add something about that. I actually just told, I think I said something to Matt and I just said something to Ryan here before we started recording today, was like when we first talked about doing that, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I don't want to add something else to Thursdays. Like I've already got enough things to do. And I'm service leader about once every 3 weeks at West usually. And the first time we did that, I went in and I was just like, dang it, that was really helpful. Like that helped a ton. I mean, to be able to go in and it's almost like you're mad. It's like, I did need
that's
that.
Right. You resent.
I want to do that. Like I need to do it, but
right.
Well,
it's
just
one of those things.
A snapshot on what those really look like was I got up there and did mine. See, when you do you're up for evaluation, one of the beauty of these things is if you come in there unprepared, it's not like you can hide that, right? Mm-hmm. So especially because you only have roughly 3 minutes, maybe sometimes 5 minutes in the first spot, and then the second spot you have 3 or 5 minutes. And so it's not like you can just get up there and ramble. So I remember this week I got done with my opening spot, and Matt Bravogo looked at me and said, "Man, I just fell asleep."
Oh dear!
And he was teasing with me.
Yeah, really. What kind of evaluation is that?
The point I think he was getting across was just I wasn't prepared, and I tried to say a whole bunch of things and I ended up not saying anything, and so when you got 4 people in a room that are listening simply to pick out what's wrong, it's just a weird, just an odd
thing. It is. And speaking of, I'll go ahead and give everybody in the audience on the podcast thing. We're going to do that with this. And you can participate in that. So if you we want to get better, this is only episode 2, so I would maintain that we should allow people just to say, hey, this is what's good, this is what we'd like more of, we think this would be helpful or interesting or whatever else. So
and you can do that by emailing podcast@onelifechurch.org.
Yeah. And
we'll read those.
That was beautiful and not planned. That was amazing. Way to go. Good stuff.
Brett, I really want, can I say something that's completely off topic, but I'm going to throw it in there. So
sure.
I really want you, to write a book someday, and I really want you to title it, I Would Maintain. Because that is my favorite thing that you say when you teach. And I don't know if you say it, but it's one of my favorite things that you say. I love it so much. Because I know when you say it, I'm like, oh, here comes the point. It's ready. It's time.
Really?
I would maintain. Yeah.
You know what? I didn't notice that until right now. But now
and I've been
back.
a part of about, 5,000 evaluations, and that's never been said to me.
I don't think it's a bad thing. Because it's not a thing to add.
But I've
I
never
just
heard
love it.
That I say I would maintain a lot or whatever.
It's going to start making it.
You're going to
my
smile
notes.
next time you say it. But no, like when you say I would maintain, I'm like, well, here it comes. I'm ready. Let's bring it.
And now the only downside is now I'll hear myself saying that and it'll never.
Now you know it.
I know. Now that I'm aware of it, it's like I'll hear myself and go, oh no, okay.
Well, that's what now that I'm going to be listening for that. That's going to make it into my notes right before this is the point. It's going to be. I will maintain. And then I'll write the point in bold.
So
there you go.
So if you write a book and you title it that, I'll only take 2%.
2%.
Yeah.
2%. Absolutely. I'm all over it.
Okay,
That's right.
thanks.
I would maintain. Got it. Be on the lookout for it.
So going to this past Sunday's message, if you want to, Brett, if you can give us any kind of like a recap, maybe, a few sentences kind of about like what it was about, and then something I was talking to Dan Sullivan last week. If you guys know Dan Sullivan, he's amazing and always has amazing ideas, does our daily Bible readings, writes them throughout the week, which is amazing to think about that he does that. But he was saying, we were talking about like the purpose of the podcast, and he said, oh yeah, asking Bret like, well, what do you wish you would have said or would have been able to say? I was like, that's a great idea for a segment. So kind of wanted to ask you, give a little bit of recap, and is there anything that you didn't get to that you wish you would have had more time to get to?
Yeah, it is kind of funny, like which version are you talking about? So I was kind of attempting that in a way. I started Thursday, the evaluation, I listened to it on Friday morning, I think, and then I changed it for Sunday, and I changed it between the 9 and the 11. And so it was a little bit of a journey of trying to say what I wanted to say. What I was wanting to say more than anything was kind of what I said, only the problem is I picked such a thick passage. John chapter 5, and the commentators even say this is like one of probably the most involved statement that Jesus makes about himself in all of the Bible. I think I mentioned this in the message. People say, well, he never claimed to be God, or they wonder where the Trinity idea came from. Well, if you've read that passage, you know where it came from, because that's what people were processing. So if I could do it over again, I wish I could have delved deeper into all that he says. I just very much hydroplaned him. He claims to be the voice that you're going to hear that's going to raise everybody, believers and unbelievers, from the dead at the end, and his relationship with the Father, and I'm always working, and I'm the judge of all the earth. All this very, very thick stuff that I felt like I gave pretty light treatment to, honestly, and so I wish I could have delved a little more in that. Is that what you're after?
Yeah,
like
sure. Like if there's anything like that, and if you want to, you can, if there's anything you want to add to it. I know when we were going through the passage the first time, and when you said that in your message about like, what do you think about Jesus being like, go and sin no more, or it could be worse, like stop. Like he just says that. Like you don't see that too often. So like,
right.
I don't know if there's anything there that was something that really stuck out to me that I don't know if I just hadn't thought of, because so often we don't hear Jesus saying those types of things.
I wish I could have, and that's why I didn't like the Thursday version. It was originally, I ended up making the points from the Thursday version to the Sunday version was really clarifying. First of all, it was all in the end about the most worthwhile thing in all of life, the most valuable thing, is to know Christ relationally. I'm more convinced of that now than ever. But know him as other. You have to remember that. And I wish I could have delved into that more, because I'm seeing a trend where people will talk about in very positive terms about Jesus, but I always want to say, well, define him. What is he like? And that's an example of that, of the Jesus of the Bible will say something to somebody's face like, oh, by the way, you just got healed, but hey, stop sinning or something worse will happen to you. Well, in a lot of people's Jesus, he wouldn't do something like that. So the Jesus of the Bible will, but sometimes our personal versions of him wouldn't have him saying that. So I think I want to raise that more and more and more. So
what I always wonder where I always wonder where people get that idea of Jesus from. Like, you know what I mean? So this idea, you hear people say that a lot. Jesus was all loving, they don't feel like he was very offensive. But that was the point that stood out to me as well, was that he absolutely was very, very offensive. So where do you think, where have we gotten to a place that people think that Jesus wasn't, he was just this all ushy-gushy, kind of all love, no offense kind of guy?
Well, again, for the non-Henderson version, this is so terrible. I even added a quote by Tim Keller. He said something like, "If your God never agrees with you, you're most likely worshiping an idealized version of yourself." So where it comes from is projecting on Jesus, who everybody, even non-Christians, view him as a positive figure. We're projecting onto him what we think, instead of letting him speak. I think that's where it's rooted in ultimately, and we want him to be a little bit more lightweight or loving, and that's a pretty light one compared to some of the other things that he says. Let's just use examples of it. That's what I think. I don't know if anybody else got any theories about where that comes from, but that's kind of one of mine. No one does have any
Josh,
theories.
anything, not specifically to add, but just to add in general, I know you said you did have some notes, like anything that, I don't know, questions or thoughts that came up as you were hearing it.
Well, just to, I guess, piggyback off of that, I didn't realize that wasn't in the earlier renditions of the message, but I did write down that Tim Keller quote. It wasn't one that I'd heard before, and I really like Tim Keller. And I think that that's a really cool and maybe a little sad point that, that the reason people do, I guess, see Jesus as this non-offensive, pacifistic type person is because we've kind of built ourselves into our beliefs, even though that, if you really dig down a little deeper, the gospel is kind of offensive sometimes. I mean, it doesn't take the politically correct route most of the time. And, that I really picked that out yesterday. I thought that was cool.
Good. Yeah. See, and it went in your notes and everything.
Yeah, it's in my notes.
No, it travels that way because it's both. I mean, he is the one who did miracles and had compassion and forgave people, and he attacked the religious leaders. But even when he does that, if you read Matthew 18, I mean, he calls them snakes and a brood of vipers and all this. And sometimes we pass that over, like, wow, that was quite a speech. I'm not sure I would say that to anybody that way. And he obviously had the authority to do it. But it's weighed out. He's deeply compassionate. But C.S. Lewis called him intolerably severe too. And if you're really looking at him as he's revealed in Scripture, you get both. And sometimes we tend to, kind of look inside ourselves and interpret it that way and form him after our own image a little bit.
And Henderson, you brought up the whole Lord, liar, lunatic thing from Lewis. Mm-hmm. That's right.
I can't remember if I did that at East or not, or when I did, but I did. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. Right. That has always been. I remember the first time I heard that. I guess it was probably 4 or 5 years ago. But I was in my car, and I think Tim Keller. I think I was listening to a sermon of his, and I think that's the first time I ever heard that argument. I didn't know much about C.S. Lewis, so maybe it was a little longer than 5 years ago. But I didn't know much about C.S. Lewis, who he was. Never really read much of his stuff. And I heard that, and that literally, just in a sense, blew my mind. And that's coming from a guy in church. But what I've learned in conversations with people who either would say that they are far from God, or, they would say something to the effect of, I'm a spiritual person, but I'm not much into church. When you start talking through this Lewis thing, there's a lot of sharp disagreement around this idea that, the whole Lord, liar, lunatic, he either is who he says he is, or he's, a liar, or he's a lunatic, one of the three. And so, have you had a lot of conversations with people around that?
Not where there's been a lot of sharp disagreement. I'd be interested in exploring that because, but those passages, when you read them, you know exactly where he got that from. What always fascinates me about Jesus, though, is we can read. You read John chapter 5. I just sign everybody, just do it. And that's what we tried to do. And it goes on. I didn't read the whole thing. I read a lot. But it goes on. And it's funny that Jesus says these really, really wild things about himself, and he gets away with it, though. You don't think, oh, this guy's crazy. No one, I don't think anybody does. They just think, oh, yeah, okay, so he's one with the Father, so he's going to be the voice that raises everybody from the dead. Yeah, that's good, that's fine. I don't know why that is. So I've not experienced a lot of disagreements with that, but you have?
Well, maybe it's disagreement, I guess people just don't necessarily accept that. It's not like we...
Like you have to choose or something?
Yeah, it's over. It's over coffee. So it's not,
right.
I'm probably not smart enough to have a true intellectual debate on that topic. Right. But people would be like, well, I don't think that's the case. It's almost like to where that's something that literally just kind of rattled me for some reason. I was a follower of Jesus. I was already in the pastoring kind of world at that time, and it still blew my mind when I heard it. But I have heard people. I was having coffee, I don't know, it was less than a year ago. And we were talking about that very same thing. And he goes, I just don't think that's reality. He kind of blames some of it on, kind of historic authorship of Scripture, and kind of sideline the whole argument.
Yeah, people don't feel like you can commit to one of those three. And maybe there is a fourth, or maybe there's a fifth. But in the end, but you can also challenge those historical document things, because that used to be everybody's backup. Well, the original Jesus probably didn't say any of that stuff. That was placed on him later. But if you study enough, that's not true. We're very confident we have what he said, even by strict skeptic standards, that we can rely on that. So I think you can kind of push that to the side. And let's imagine this guy really did say this stuff. And you're kind of back to, it's a little hard to debate him, in my personal opinion, that whoever's saying this either is who he said he was, or he's lost something, or he's just lying and manipulator and everything else. But he gets away with it for most of us. we just kind of go, wow, that's just how Jesus talks. That's what he does. He's all about it.
And the first line in that passage, or one of the first lines where he just looks at the guy and says, do you want to get well? Like, I just have this mindset that he's saying it like, I mean, do you even want to? Like, with a little bit of attitude, you know, I don't, maybe he doesn't.
I know. I still never did figure that one out exactly. Like, what was he after there? I mean, was it kind of a push, or was it just a genuinely compassionate question? Anybody have any opinions about that? Like, do you want to get well?
Well, I think something you said later on in the message about when he kind of came back at him after he had been healed and said, stop sinning or it's going to, something worse could happen. I think that I've read that passage several times, in the past, and I'd never thought of it that way. And you mentioned that it never says in the text anywhere that he was disabled from birth. It kind of leads you to believe that it potentially could have been something that he caused doing something, irresponsible or crazy and got himself into that situation. So, with that being said, and he kind of, references it later in that passage, but when he says that, he very well could be saying, if you're still maintaining these, these opinions or these thought processes on life that got you into this to begin with, then, do you even want to be well? And then later on, it kind of, I guess, sets up that he's probably doing or potentially doing things that he was doing prior to whatever it was that caused this disability. And, then that really goes back to what Jesus' question was, did you ever even want to get well to begin with?
Yeah, because ultimately, you don't want to break this pattern that put you here. So
right,
it's
exactly.
Linking those two. That's a possibility. And then you wonder, I keep wondering, did he see him start down that very road, like stop sinning, like is in right now? I can see you're headed over there to buy those drugs or whatever the guy was. I don't know if they did that in those days, but did he see him walk that way or think that way? Or so maybe it was relevant. The two were relevant.
Right.
And again, we have to be careful not to speculate too much. But on the other hand, it is just kind of a fascinating way that he handles people, and it's different with the blind man later. He doesn't do that, and it's specific to this particular occasion. So, but point being that Jesus is the other. You're getting to know someone else, and so let him be who he is, rather than letting him be what you think he ought to be, which is, I think, is what I'm guilty of it too. It's not. I think we all do it to a certain degree.
What's kind of, as we kind of start wrapping up with this conversation, what's a question that people could be asking themselves or be processing from that you would kind of throw out there?
I think, and I opened the message with just out of my own life context was, I said it this way in the better version, which was the Bible declares it, but for me, life affirms it. When I've gone to funerals and I've packed all my stuff around, and we all have limited lives. We only have one and only single solitary life. According to the Bible, knowing Jesus relationally, truly, fully, following him is the single most valuable thing, period. And so what does that mean? Am I doing that? What does that look like in my life? Am I actually pursuing it? If it's the most valuable thing, how am I pursuing that in? Am I in Scripture? And then the ultimate point, the relation to the table conversation was in church. Are we helping each other do that? I mean intentionally. Like we're trying at One Life, we're trying to design it. We're trying to give our leaders like questions they can ask people just around a table like this. Let's take it beyond talking about the NCAA finals, and let's go ahead and ask someone, how have you seen God work in your life? How have you increased in your love for Jesus? And if it's the most important thing, that should be fair game. Why not do that? I guess that would be my thing. Just ponder that. And that's why I had people pray, Lord, give me something different to do. So I'm doing a Bible study right now, just my own personal life, designed to be a lot more relational, I guess. How can I know you a little bit more? So that'd be mine. I don't know if anybody's got any suggestions, but that would be something I would just say to ask yourself about it in the end. And no one else has any suggestions.
Oh no, I'm doing I've never studied through the book of Isaiah, so that's what I started doing. So I'm gonna kind of read through it a couple times and then kind of do some chapter by chapter study and just to learn it a little bit. It's a lot.
I'd say
I'd never done it before, and I've always wanted to do it. So you you said take a step, so that's my step.
Oh, that's a great step. Well,
So,
and that's what I think
we'll
it's
see.
second only to the Psalms in terms of how many quotations from Jesus directly or allusions to. No, or maybe Deuteronomy, but I know Isaiah's up there somewhere in the
Yeah,
ranks.
I think I was on chapter 9 this morning, and there's a lot of just familiar language in there that you look back and it's, oh, I didn't even know that was from the book of Isaiah. So
Yeah.
it's pretty cool.
Are you just reading through it, or are you using like something along with it?
I'm going to read through it a couple times, and then I've got this really cool, it's like a cultural background commentary of the Old Testament that goes through and explains a lot of some of the just kind of what we think is odd language or names of, certain things or activities in culture that day. And it explains all that. So I'm kind of using those two together to read through it a couple times, and then I'll go back and bring in commentators and just kind of take it chapter by chapter.
Go ahead.
No, you please.
I don't know if this is necessarily an answer to the question or not, but last night, my wife and I met with our growth group, and we kind of pitched that question to the group. How can we? I guess we framed it as how can we as a group, just kind of a small group of believers, how can we do that better? And what we kind of came to, I guess, kind of relates back to last week's message a little bit too, which I thought was an awesome analogy about kind of identifying ourselves as Mephibosheth. And so we talked about that last night at group, and how can we help each other, help others around us, and ourselves place Jesus at that number one value spot. And just what we came to, kind of the consensus of the group, was just to be more intentional about identifying ourselves as Mephibosheth. And as we're in our group setting and we're bringing, new individuals into the group, or we're seeing people, at church or at work or in the community or whatever it may be, if we're identifying ourselves that way intentionally, then, that'll kind of bleed through into how we communicate with people and how we see life. And it'll really, even without verbally saying it, it'll kind of create opportunities for us to, have them join us at the table.
Yeah. So you're not ranking yourself on how much we know Jesus. I'm a 9 and you're a 6.
Right,
It's more like we're all kind of in the same boat and we all want to make progress in that area, but we're not viewing ourselves as something special. We're just kind of at the table. And same way anybody else would be.
Last week, when we discussed a little deeper into that message in particular, that's kind of how we said it. It was that, no matter how much I've been in church, studied, prayed, whatever, I deserve that grace 0%. And the next person next to me who's never been in church a day in their life, never read the Bible, whatever, they deserve it exactly as much as I do.
Right.
0%. So, we both have the same, right to be at the table, which is nothing that we haven't been given. And I think kind of just an intentional viewpoint or worldview of that is kind of how we as a group kind of came to how we can kind of place that,
Yeah, you guys had that discussion. It's pretty impressive.
It's pretty amazing. And then
Glad to know that's going on out there.
I want to take a time while Josh is here, and you are a connections director for One Life Henderson, and we're talking through this series about getting connected to groups and being a part of that, like not just doing life alone, but doing life with other people. Without giving, all the things to do, how would you tell people to do that? Because I know a lot of people come talk to you after service, like they'll come out and talk to you after service and ask you questions about groups and teams and being connected. What kind of stuff are we telling people to do there? I
encourage everyone to get involved on a team that serves right there on campus, and also a growth group. But if you're just looking for a place to get connected into a community of believers and grow in your own faith, help those beside you grow, I would absolutely have to recommend, first and foremost, getting in a growth group. I feel like my wife and I have led a group for the last few years, and it's had its ups and downs and ebbs and flows as far as how many people we had come in and things like that. But we've built some really strong relationships. And, the example that Jesus set for us was that community is the best way to do life. And so, and we've really experienced that in the relationships that we've built. Those discussions that we have are impactful. And I feel like, even as we're, typically leading the discussion, I feel like we grow as much as anyone who would attend. And so I feel like that would be the first step towards, getting into the community.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. No, I wanted to hear your perspective because I know that, you are one of the people that people are actually connecting to. And I shared this with our staff a few weeks ago, and I'll say it here, but when I was in Henderson a few weeks ago, talking to Mark, my mom and stepdad came down, and it was the day we were all filling out connection cards, which was really, really fun. And my mom is like a rule follower. She'll do anything she's supposed to do. She's like, oh, I'll fill out the card. So she filled out the card, and she sent me a picture, and you hand wrote her a note thanking her for coming. And you didn't have to do that, and you did. And I really appreciate it. She really appreciates it. And those are the kinds of things that I hope people see, that we really want to connect with you. And I know that Josh really wants to connect with you in Henderson. And so thank you for that. I really appreciate that. That was very nice.
Well,
way to go, Josh. Probably another gold star
That's
there for you
good.
somewhere.
Gold
That's
star.
right. If she had the authority to do it,
Yeah.
I think it'd probably go. That's right.
And then, since you did mention this earlier, I feel like we have to acknowledge it. You talked about him beating people up.
I know.
Like, we have to talk about this, or people are going to be like, what are
I
you
was
talking about?
hoping it would come back around. What did
Yeah.
it mean? I said it would come back around. Well,
We'll close with that.
What a favorite factoid about Josh is that everybody needs to know he's actually he's a cage fighter on the side. I don't know how all that works. Like, I do my job, I do connections, and then I go and I beat people up in cages. And so I just love that. It's just like a nice little thing to know about you. And
yeah,
also,
that's I guess a little known fact when it comes to, when I first meet people, they, I guess I don't give off the air of cage fighter, when I'm just in a discussion
just for
with
the
someone.
record, no, you
so
don't.
sometimes I'll sneak it into conversation for shock value,
Right.
and just be like, yeah, you know what I do when I, in the evenings I just hit people, and they're like, oh, hit people, and it's like, yeah, they hit me back, and it's fine. Like,
okay, yeah, that's right. It's in a cage and all that.
Yeah, it's every now and then on a Sunday he'll roll in with like a swollen eye. I'm like, been training or what's going on?
Yeah, actually, after I leave here today, I'm driving back to Morganfield, and that's what we're gonna do. We're just gonna beat each other up
Oh
until.
my gosh.
Is that right? Man, that sounds like a blast. Wow.
Well, hey, if you
amazing.
just
How
want to
can I
come on down with it.
I'd love it. I was eating it up. That's right. Yeah.
I'd be
Just
so
like me back
scared.
in the day. That's right. Yeah. Exactly.
Okay, well, I'm glad you're on our team, so that's exciting. I guess kind of anything else to wrap up, anything else to add? I know that there is an opportunity, if you are in a group, that we do have huddle questions out there each week for everyone to take a look at. You can find those on the One Life app or on our website, onelifechurch.org. And honestly, it's just a great way to continue the conversation. And so we did say we were going to end every podcast with Ask Bret a Question, which we didn't have anyone submit any via email this week, but you can do that at podcast at
Oh, they can do that? I thought it was just people
onelifechurch.org.
here. Okay.
No, people can submit them, so I won't tell you until that time. But I was wondering
yeah,
if
that's
Josh
part
had
of
a
it.
question for you since he's here.
I should have been thinking about one, and I've been too busy thinking about how intrigued I am with Ryan's question because he sounded really excited about it.
She just pitched to him. If he's ready, then
Yeah, I'm
he
not
asked me-
ready. I'm not prepared
because
this
he
time.
said, "Are there any there's no boundaries on these or something like that?" And I absolutely said, yes, there are.
Okay, so my question is: there is a certain area in Evansville that has been given the name Nicholson Pass. And I'm just curious as to, I'm sure our listeners would love to hear that story.
Okay, well, just in the interest of time, it's actually technically in Chandler, and the person I referenced a while back was the executive director of our organization. Yeah, they were building a house, and our staff went out to the house, and my wife had an FJ Cruiser, and I had always been trying to tell my wife, you need to take this thing off road. She's like, I don't want to. I want to keep it pretty. And so we were out there, and it just looked to me like there was a perfect place. I was driving her vehicle to go and do the 4-wheel thing. And I had some of you guys in the car, and I just went over the hill and went down there and said, the FJ Cruiser can handle it. This is going to be amazing. This is going to be awesome. And it hit the bottom of the hill, and that thing got stuck to the point where her husband had to get a tractor out and pull me out of there. And so they renamed that Nicholson Pass. It does exist out in Chandler, and it was and I tried to convince everybody not to put it on social media because I did not want my wife to see what I had done. I said, let me handle this. I will tell her in my own way and in my own time.
And none
it
of
looks
us
like
did.
This is it. Yeah. No, she
None
knew.
of us did. But
That's
what's
right.
funny,
No, you did. Yeah.
he said he saw a place that looked like a perfect spot.
Yeah.
And when he said that, what he means is an extraordinarily muddy ditch.
Yeah. Don't do
That's
it.
what they're for.
It
That's
looks
right.
like quicksand.
The other car we were outside screaming, honking our horn, like, don't go down there. And you guys
And
went.
the guys inside were like, "Yeah, let's go."
I feel like I missed this trip. Who all was in this vehicle?
I know Matt was in there, and
Thomas.
Thomas and Jason, maybe.
Yeah.
Jason.
yeah.
Jason,
Michael
Matt,
was
Thomas.
there.
And I could tell as soon as I hit the bottom, like, this is not going to work. And then the bottom fell
That
out of my
was
soul.
so funny.
It was
Gosh, that was funny.
Okay, so I appreciate that.
Okay, Brett, what's the what are we learning about this week?
Wait, okay. Yeah, I felt a little guilty because the table, I've approached it a little odd, okay, because I could tell people when I was going through the whole message yesterday, I brought up at one point, what's this got to do with the table? And I could see some people like, yeah, that's a good question because we have no idea. But it will be more about actually, we're doing this whole thing. It's about what's the local church all about. And we're going to talk about from Romans chapter 12, where it says, be devoted to one another in brotherly love, and really explore what that means, like devotion love versus emotional love, and what the local church is really supposed to look like, and God's design on how the relationships actually function. So I'm hoping to explore that as deeply as I possibly can, and it'll be a little bit more on topic with the table thing. They've been on topic, but this one will be a little bit more direct, I guess you'd say.
I can't wait.
Yeah, I'm sure you can. I appreciate that.
Thank you guys for joining us for episode 2 of the podcast. You'll hear more about what Brett just talked about in episode 3, and you can also always watch any of our messages at onelifechurch.org or on our One Life app.
The end.